My name is Tammy Leavy. I am the author of a book called I Survived. The book is about a journey of healing, of trauma, triumph that took place in my life at an early age. So I grew up in Rockford, Illinois on Elm Street. This house was like a house of where all my trauma began. In this house at first it was just me and my mother. My mother later on had a boyfriend, later on married him, and after she married him, years later, my stepsister came and stayed with us. Me and my mother had a fragile relationship. My mother had an incident at work where she bent over and her bra strap got caught in a machine and cut her back in half. My mother later started taking pain pills. After the became this came in stages of my life where some of the trauma took place. After she got married, my mother would leave for months at a time. When her high would come down, then she would come home. She would sleep for days. Later on, I also realized that my mom was hiding her pain, which she didn't have an outlet. And so at that time, smoking was an outlet. Every Friday, I can remember having card games at our home where she had friends over and they would fry catfish, they would bring spaghetti. They would be different people at our home, but I also remember how her husband looked at me. The molestation started at 6 years old. I stayed at home, he stayed at home, and so this was the perfect opportunity for him to take advantage of me because she was never home. And so I would have to fight this monster every night. So when she would leave, I wouldn't know when she would come back home. I would oftentimes look out this window that I had in the house on Elm Street, which was a side window, and I would listen for the doors for her to come home. And she would sometimes leave and just say, "Hey, I'm going to the store. I'm going to see one of my friends." Well, those visits turned into days. There was no cell phones at the time. There were house phones. I would run to the phone every time it would ring, but it would be somebody looking for her. I oftentimes would ask my mother's husband if he could find my mother, and he would say, "Shut up, she'll be home when she's home." Then he would leave, but I oftentimes would be home by myself. There was days my mother was home, she was cooking, she was there. But after that incident with her back, I noticed that my mom just could not take what was going on. As the pain increased, that's when the character of my mom changed. My mother was a good mother until this happened, but I didn't disown my mom. So my mom was dating this man before her accident, and so later on, they got married. At the age of 6, I was touched inappropriately by her husband, a man who would come in my room and touch me every single night. When I was at the age of having menstruations, he would still touch me. I was touched in every hole that I had. It didn't matter if I screamed. I oftentimes was tied up by my hands. I was tied up by my feet. I was crying for help and no one was there. We had a neighbor that lived upstairs. I can remember the bathroom had a hole in it at the top of it, and I thought she would hear me. And sometimes she would come downstairs and sit on the porch and she was like, "You guys were up late last night." And I'm wondering, when I was up late at night, what did you hear? The screams that I had, I know were not a normal scream. I don't know if he ever told her. I don't know if she knew. All I know is that every night I had to fight, and it didn't matter. He would stand in the doorway. He would be buck naked. He would have his penis in his hand, and he would be looking at me and staring at me. It started at 6, and it went to the age of 14. I can remember in my teen age that I got really tired of it, so I slept with a knife under my pillow. I decided to fight back. So this night he decided to punch me, and he decided to slap me. He decided to tell me he told me I was black, I was ugly, nobody would ever want me. He don't understand why I would not just have his baby. He would say some of the most awful things to me. When you're tied up, your mouth is covered, and you have this man who is probably 6 foot, 200 and something pounds on a 100-pound girl. How do you fight? How do you stop him from putting it in any hole that he could? He would stand over me. He would ejaculate in my face. He would then laugh and rub it in my face. And then he would tell me, "I'll be back tomorrow. And if you tell anybody, I'll kill you and I'll kill them too." I believed him. Growing up in our household, we were told you don't tell anybody anything that goes on in your home. We were threatened. Anything that goes on in this house stays in this house. That's why I was silent. If you're trained at 6 to not say anything, you don't say anything. And so one day, I feel like I got stifled because I knew he would come. I knew that I wouldn't be able to rest. I oftentimes would fall asleep in school. Oftentimes my grades were slacking, but when I would go to school, that's when I would find peace. But I still didn't know how to interact with people because I felt like I had to be somebody that I really wasn't. But it was because I didn't know who I was. I'm Tammy to you, but I don't know who Tammy is. Tammy has a person that she has to fight every night. And so some nights I didn't have any fight in me. I don't care if it was from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock. If I fought with him, he kept coming back. He would snatch the covers off of me. If I would take a shower, he would bust in the bathroom while I was showering and just stand there and play with himself. It was almost like I was having a mental breakdown and nobody could see it, because how am I supposed to be in a house that has no peace? I oftentimes would say, I'm not going to sleep. I would sit up. He would snatch me by my legs and pull me down. He would grab my legs so hard and spread them apart, and he would put his fingers in me. It didn't matter if I had panties on or not. He would rip my panties. When my mom would wash, sometimes she would be like, what is going on with your underwear? Why are your underwear looking like this? She's like, you're not washing good. You're not wiping good. And it would just be that. And she would throw them away, and it would be this long lecture afterwards. I just wanted her to come home one time and catch him on top of me. He would leave the door open, and if he heard a noise, he would jump up. I can remember him jumping up several times and running to see if anybody was in. And then once he saw the coast was clear, he would still come back in, and he would finish what he was doing, and he would not leave until he finished. He was obsessed with me. He would come when I got involved with sports. He would come and sit in the bleachers and just look at me, stare at me. And I can oftentimes just remember calling him, like, I would say to him, I hate you, and he would be like, I love you. I will never forget it, and how he said it to me. I became this person that he called me. I became this ugly person. Every time I looked in the mirror, I thought I was this ugly person. The picture on my book shows a little girl and a woman, and it has a teardrop. Oftentimes, I had to speak to myself and tell myself, you're not her anymore. It wasn't until I went and decided to get counseling that now I'm able to go back and tell my story, to help, to heal, and to fully understand that you can survive some of those things, but you have to be free. You have to learn that suppressing the feelings that you have cannot help. So all these years I thought I was healed until I would have a trigger. It wasn't until I got married that I realized I didn't like certain touches, that I didn't like anyone to just jump on me. I didn't like anyone that would just come in a room and stare at me. It would be certain things that would trigger me that I realized I need to get help. Those relationships, sometimes they would end up in someone cheating because I wasn't very sexual. I wasn't that person that they wanted in the bedroom. And so I thought I had to just lay and be quiet, because I was trained from the age of 6 to 14 to not say anything because my mouth was covered. So how do you have an intimate relationship with the one that you are unconditionally in love with? Well, you have to start releasing those things and learning to love yourself and to know that intimacy is right with your husband. So I had to learn another touch. Oftentimes when men would tell me they love me, I didn't know how to accept what they were saying because I've heard that. But I oftentimes still struggle with, am I really pretty? Am I really beautiful? So if my husband tells me at times, you look really nice, you're pretty, I will oftentimes go back to the mirror and I didn't see that. But now I'm starting to heal, and I know that my heart is beautiful, and that what makes me beautiful. And so anything, I always say, anything made after the image of God is beautiful. At the age of 14, I decided that I couldn't take it anymore. I had several aunties that loved me but never knew what was going on. They always seen me, and they showed so much love. I was just praying to God one day, and this auntie happened to come over that day, and at that time my mother wasn't there, and so I pulled my auntie to the side and I told her what was happening, and she said, what? And so this is what we did. I had bunk beds. When my stepsister came to live with me, she would sleep at the top, I would sleep at the bottom. When he would want to come into the room, he would take her to the front, to the living room. We had a brown couch. He would lay his daughter on the couch. And so my auntie was like, we're going to set him up. And so we had a closet and it had this latch lock on it. And my auntie put me in the closet that night. I was quiet. She said, do not move. Do not make a sound. I stayed in that closet. I can remember for about 2 to 3, 4 hours. And my auntie got in the top bunk bed because we would switch. Me and my sister would switch. And so that night he knew I was at the top of the bunk bed. He thought I was. And so the bunk bed had a little ladder. And so I remember him, because she was telling me he got to the end of the bed and he pulled the cover. He was rubbing on her leg and he pulled the cover and she popped up and she said, and he ran out of the house with no underwear on, butt booty naked, with an erection, and ran out the house. She jumped out of the bed. She had a knife, and I can just hear a lot of commotion. And so where we stayed was on a corner house, and it had a little parking lot field, and it was a project called Fairgrounds. And so he had a lady that he was dealing with in Fairgrounds, and he ran to her house. I was let out of the closet. We called the police. My auntie stayed there with me. She called my father, informed my father what was going on. My father lived in Mississippi at the time. He was married. And so my father came to town to get me, and he said, I'm going to kill him. My father stayed here for a week, but my dad worked on an oil rig, and so he had to get back to work. So the choice was me to go back with him. I can remember my mom coming home. My auntie walked the streets, looked for her. My mom was at a friend's house, came home. My auntie told my mom what happened, and my mother instantly said, she's lying. And my auntie said, I was in the top bed when he went to touch her. And she looked at my auntie, and she just looked in like disbelief. I can remember her face, and I can remember her sitting in the chair, and she jumped up in my face and she said, what did you do to my husband to make him want you? And I said, I've been trying to tell you. And she said, you're a liar. And so the police came and they asked my mom all these questions. They sat me down, they asked me all these questions. When it was time for my mom to press charges, my mom didn't press charges. My mom told me she didn't believe me. It was so bad that I had to have surgery on my vagina from this man being so large. And so when I went to the doctor, it was a time where the doctor went out of the room and came back and grabbed my hand and said, I'm sorry. A big investigation went on. My mom could not handle it. And I can remember before my dad got home, my mom looked at me with this look and she said, I'm disgusted by you. I don't understand why you would want my husband. She blamed me for what he did to me. My father came in town and I left with him. I ended up coming back and staying with my mother, but it wasn't until she was divorced from him. I did not have children until I was 21 when I had my first daughter. But you know how everybody thought that on prom night, that would be the night. So everybody thought that I lost my virginity on prom night. I didn't lose my virginity then. I lost my virginity at 6. I didn't get a chance to tell anyone or I didn't get a choice of who I wanted. This man had me in I didn't like sex. I didn't want sex. I started dating some guys. And when I would have sex, I was trying to find the pleasure that my friends talked about. I would lay there like a lump on a log. I went into this withdrawn girl who I felt like was a nun because I knew nothing about bedroom experiences. I just thought my friends had sex, I'll have sex. And so what they thought were great sex, it was a learning experience for me. And so when I really started liking someone, I thought I had to let them do everything that he did to me. I thought that I had to lay there with my mouth open for them to penetrate, or I thought that I had to just, whatever you want to do to me, I'm just here. So there was no connection. I'm just now finding connection with sex, but it has a hindrance on my sexual life. I feel like sometimes I go back to my childhood where I want to get in the bed first and I want to go to sleep first. And if someone pulls the cover, I'm like, I gotta jump up. I'm just now finding like who I am, who Tammy is, what Tammy can bring, how Tammy can make Tammy feel before I can make my husband feel. So I've been in therapy for 2 years, and that therapy has helped me. And I thank God that I have a husband that is patient, that is passionate, that is not pushy when it comes to we have to have sex. And so I'm grateful for that. My mother took a large amount of, because my mother used to watch my kids. I was a hairstylist, cosmetologist for 30 years. So when I moved back to Rockford, my mom would watch my kids. Everyone would think that those were my mom's kids because she would take them everywhere. I would work sometimes from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. I was just trying to make a living at the time. And so one day I pulled up at my mother's house. My mother was sitting on her front porch, and she was sitting with her ex-husband at the time, which was the monster. And so when I seen that, I knew that my two girls were in the house. I instantly was enraged. And so I went in the house, and when I saw them and I walked up to the stairs, I wanted to a rage, and I was like, I cannot believe you're talking to him, someone that hurt your daughter. And I just went on and I said so many things, and all I could think about was him looking at my girls, and I lost it. And I went in the house, I got my kids, and I didn't talk to my mother for 2 months. And I can remember getting a knock on the door stating that my mom was at the hospital. In between that time, I hadn't talked to my mom, and so her neighbor came and told me she was at the hospital. And so I didn't go right away. It wasn't until the second day I didn't go to the hospital. The third day I went to the hospital, I was advised that my mom had took a large amount of, and that her heart was pretty much exploding. And so I knew my mother was on. There was many nights that I would wake up out of my sleep when I was married and go try to find her. On that third day at the hospital, my mom said to me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all the things that I've done to you. You're my only child. And at that time, I just wanted an apology. Even during all those years, I still had to love my mom. I still had to take care of my mom. We heard Code Blue, room 203, heart unit. That's my mom's room. So I run. They're on top of my mom, and they're giving her compressions. I see her feet jump. They get her back. They rush her downstairs. I hear Code Blue. It's my mom. The fourth Code Blue, I see a nurse walking toward me. I see a chaplain walking toward me, and I'm sitting on a bench away from everybody. By this time, the hospital is filled with family and friends, and the nurse comes and says, I'm looking for Tammy. And I say, that's me. The chaplain comes and sits by me. He says, we're sorry. They did everything they could. Am I healed from it? Yes. The monster paid for his crime. Although my mom didn't press charges, another mother did. And so, yes, he went to jail and he passed away in jail. So 2012, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I fought that battle. I had a very, very great support system. In 2016, I fought lung cancer, and I have one lung. It's amazing because I was told I didn't have cancer. And so they watched it. They watched it for a year. They go in to do a biopsy. I'm in the hospital for 2 months because he went in and took the cancer out. I end up having to get my lung removed because it was cancerous. My kids had to make the decision of whether they wanted to save my life. And so here I am right now with one cancer. I am showing others that it doesn't matter what you go through. I had a battle. When I say I battled, I battled. I can remember not being able to walk from the bathroom to the bed. I would be so winded. But now I am a MAT coordinator for abuse. And the amazing part of it is I work on the same property where I was tortured, and now I'm helping others. I survived things that would have taken people to do, and I chose because of what I've seen in my mother. And that's why I can say she taught me things. Even in her worst days, she taught me how to be a survivor because of what I seen her suffer through. Her suffering caused me to survive.